So, um, growing up, I had two younger brothers. Brian is 2.5 years younger than me. He's been here. He's the one who came and played drums, and his wife Natalie sang. And then I have a younger brother, Andy, who is 7 years younger than me. I didn't really pay attention to Andy because he was so much younger than me, and so it wasn't really like he was a person. But Brian and I, we had an interesting relationship where I was just like big brother. And so sometimes I looked out for him, but most of the time I didn't. But there was this one time where he came to me, and he was a little kid. He was, 5 or 6, and he had this little 5 or 6-year-old bike, and tires that big around. And he said, "Jeff, I'm going to ride right at that curb, and I'm just going to ride so fast, I'm not going to have to pop a wheelie or anything to get up over the curb." I'm like, all right. It kind of looked like this. And I did that sinister laugh there at the end, too. I'm like, oh. Now, let me ask you, would the compassionate thing have been to say nothing and just he wanted to do it. And so to say, hey, don't do that, you shouldn't do that, that's not okay to do that, would be taking away freedom. It would be telling him what to do. It would be, it wasn't my business. Or would the compassionate thing have been to tell him the truth that your tires that are this big are not going to go up over a curb that is this high if you just run straight into it? Which is the more compassionate thing? Speaking the truth or letting him do it? I didn't ask what the big brother thing to do would be. What is it? Okay, it was one of those things where truth is compassion, all right? Where the compassionate thing to do was to speak honestly, was to speak in truth, would be to tell him, this isn't going to end the way that you think it's going to end. This isn't going to do for you what you think it's going to do. Now, you can look at that and be like, oh yeah, but Jeff, when you tell him, hey, you shouldn't do that, don't do that, it's not going to be good, you're not letting him decide. You're taking away his freedom. You're not letting him be who he thinks he should be. You're not letting him do what he thinks is going to be best for him. Isn't that the best thing that you could do? Is just let him be who he needs to be. Let him do what he needs to do. And a lot of times we start to get into this thinking that we should step back, withhold truth, withhold what will bring life, because we think that is more compassionate, that is more tolerant than speaking truth. In 2 Timothy, in the Bible, it says this. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2, starting in verse 2. Preach the word of God. Be prepared whether the time is favorable or not. Patiently correct. We're kind of told not to correct, right? Just patiently correct, rebuke, meaning say, hey, that's not good, that's not okay. And encourage people with good teaching. A time is coming when people will no longer listen to sound and wholesome teaching. They will follow their own desires, and they will look for teachers who will tell them whatever their itching ears want to hear. See, when Brian told me what he was going to do, what he wanted to hear was, yeah, do it, right? They will reject the truth and chase after myths. But you should keep a clear mind in every situation. Don't be afraid of suffering for the Lord. Work at telling others the good news and fully carry out the ministry God has given you. But when we start backing off, when we stop speaking truth because we don't want to offend somebody or hey, shouldn't we just let them do what they're going to do, we are leaving them vulnerable. And sometimes we will find ourselves even participating in things that are not going to bring the life that God has designed. And it isn't hatred. It isn't, I can't stand you. But withholding truth is never going to be good. and it's never going to bring the life that people want. But in our culture today, we have these words that we use where, like the word tolerance. Tolerance in our society has been elevated to this wonderful thing, that we're supposed to live in tolerance of one another. And what that typically means, what people typically mean by that is, hey, you should be okay with whatever somebody else wants to do. And we've elevated relationship, tolerance in relationships, friendships, families. We've elevated tolerance to this thing that we should strive for. When in reality, the very word tolerance is the lowest level of relating to someone. It is just above, I'm going to beat you up because I hate you and never going to talk to you again. Tolerance is, okay, I'm going to tolerate you. I'm not going to appreciate you. I'm not going to look out for you. I'm not going to encourage you. I'm not going to relate to you. I'm going to tolerate you. But in our culture, we have elevated tolerance kind of like never before, where now it's something that we actually think we're supposed to strive for. And we've been going through this series, The Power of Sex, where we've been talking about the design of God, right? And we've been saying this every week, right? God designed sex, so, and we don't need to be shy about it. We don't need to be embarrassed. It isn't something that's like, in fact, that's something that comes from our culture too. It's like sex is this dirty thing, and it's this thing that you're supposed to be sneaky with. It's this thing that you're supposed to like not really talk about. God designed sex, so sex is good. But this next part is the part where we usher in these other ideas. So sex is good the way God designed it. God designed sex to be powerful. He designed sex to be uniting between a husband and a wife. In fact, sex is so powerful, it is only to be had within the commitment and the bonds of marriage. Outside of that, sex is destructive. Outside of that, because of the power and the unity that sex brings, it also creates this incredible tearing when it's torn apart. So sex is good because God designed it, but it's only good the way God designed it. But again, in our culture, we have begun thinking, and it's not new thinking, but our culture has this thought of, no. You should be able to think of sex any way that you want. You should be able to treat sex any way that you want. You should be able to have sex any way that you want. You should be able to have sex with whoever you want. And the boundaries and rules, no. Those things should be up to you. And we love the idea of it being up to us. But all of us have people in our lives. Some of you are in this, you have experienced yourself of the hurt and the destruction of when we start to decide to do things our way instead of the way God designed it, whether it's sex or friendships or attitudes or whatever it may be. When we take the design away from God's design, it begins to be really hurtful and really destructive, and yet we have a culture who says, no. Whatever Christina thinks, Christina gets to do. Whatever Gavin thinks is a good idea, well, then he should be allowed to just go and do that. And far be it from anybody else to speak anything against what somebody has made up their mind to do, because you need to be tolerant. They should be allowed to do whatever they want, because you're supposed to be compassionate. And we've lost the reality that truth is compassion. Truth is the most compassionate thing that you can do, and the most compassionate thing that you can present. And the stuff that we've been talking about, and the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight from God's word is said and intended with compassion. Compassion from God, saying, I love you so much and I want life for you. And you're not going to be able to attain the life that I have for you by doing it on your own and going with whatever you think or feel or whatever your opinion is. So the stuff that God says to us isn't meant to smack you upside the head and be like, you're a terrible person and here's the rules and It's said with compassion. It's said with truth. And one of the things in all of this that we need to understand and remember is that you are designed in the image of God. Some of you, which is a whole nother message which we talk about a lot around here also, but you have a hard time believing that or valuing that. But the fact that you are created in the image of God is of the highest. Oh man, that's important. He didn't make you a worm. He didn't make you just this animal that he has no relationship with and doesn't want relationship. He designed you in his image. And the reality that goes along with that is that Satan hates that. And he wants to do whatever he can to make Taya think that, oh, she's only. Oh, Aaron, he's never going to be. Nick, he should try hard. Satan hates the idea that you were designed in the image of God because he doesn't want you to live out your life in the image of God. He doesn't want you going with God's design. He wants you going with your design. He wants Jesse to get into his mind that he should be able to do anything he wants. He wants Carter to be so confident in what he can do and talents or personality that he doesn't need anything and he can stand on his own. He wants Sammy Joe to be so dependent on who she can make herself to be that she doesn't have to look anywhere else. Satan hates the idea that you are created in the image of God. And part of the other plan of Satan, the strategy of Satan, is for the rest of us to get so afraid of speaking the truth because, oh my gosh, culture says I shouldn't offend anybody. Culture says I should just let anybody be whoever they want to be, and who am I? And even when the truth is like, hey, it's right there. No, don't speak the truth because that might restrict some freedoms. That might put some boundaries on people. And you shouldn't do that because they should be able to do anything they want. If Brian wants to ride and hit that curb, he should have the full freedom. In fact, not just the freedom to do it, you should encourage him to do it. And if he doesn't have your full-throated support, man, intolerant, hateful, unkind. This is the message that Satan wants us to have, is that the rest of you, you have the truth. You have the truth of God. Not your opinion, not your judging, and you have the truth of who God is. You have the truth of who God says your friend is. And Satan wants to convince us to go, no. You better shut up. And what we are experiencing now, we now live in a culture that has become terrified of identifying and speaking truth. We are terrified. Anybody in this room, you've seen the truth about something, but you don't, every day in class, you know what the answer is for something. Do you raise your hand and be like, yeah? Well, maybe sometimes. But man, wait till college when the professor's about to let the class go and then ask, anybody have a question? And that one guy in the back, yes, Professor Bobcat. Yeah. And you're like, Our culture has become terrified of identifying and speaking truth. Going, you know what? Here is the truth, not of what I think. So this isn't me hating on you. Man, I don't want to speak the truth because what if it's not received? Or what if it looks like to where we've become paralyzed, to where we can't answer, like, what? And one of the significant ways, this is certainly not the only way, but since we're in this series, this is what we're talking about tonight, that it's certainly one of the ways we do this is in our sexuality, in the way we handle sex and the way we handle relationships. And whether it's sexual identity or gender identity or whatever it is, we get locked up in our culture now of identifying and speaking truth. And I found this interview video, and what I appreciate, and I'm just going to give you a heads up about this, is the way this is handled and the rest of the video, the follow-up and the organization that this guy is from, I really appreciate the love and the grace and the tact that this is handled with. And so none of this is meant to be derogatory. None of this is meant to be, I'm going to make you look stupid. None of it's not meant to do that. And I appreciate the way it's handled with integrity and care and grace toward people. But I want you to pay attention to the way that people are responding in this video and see if you can identify any of this truth of where our culture is at in identifying and speaking truth.
There's been a lot of talk about identity lately, but how far does it go? And is it possible to be wrong? We went to the University of Washington to find out.
Are you aware of the debate happening in Washington State around the ability to access bathrooms, locker rooms, spas based on gender identity and gender expression?
I think people should be able to have access to the facility.
I think bathrooms could and potentially should be gender neutral because there doesn't need to be a classification for differences.
I think people definitely should have the ability to go into whichever locker room they want.
I feel like at least public universities should do their best to accommodate for those who do not have a specific gender identity.
You know, whether you identify as male or female and whether your sex at birth is matching to that, you should be able to utilize the resources.
So if I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you. Okay, like, yeah.
Nice to meet you.
I'd be like, what? Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
I'd ask you how you came to that conclusion.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Like, yeah, be who you are.
I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out of my way and tell you, no, you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and for some reason need to do that now.
If that's where you feel like mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5".
If you truly believed you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, like that's wrong to believe in it, because I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
You sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
Yes.
If you thoroughly debated me or explained why you felt that you were 6'5", I feel like I would be very open to saying that you were 6'5", or Chinese, or a woman.
Again, I want to reiterate this. I didn't show you that for you to elicit a, oh my gosh, they're so dumb. Oh gosh, that's so stupid. What dumb thinking. We all fall into this kind of thinking when we start to go, oh, well, I'm not going to speak truth to my friend who is engaging in this behavior of what they look at on their phone. Who am I to say, hey, that's not going to be good for you? Someone who is involved in a relationship that is not healthy, where for whatever reason it's not a healthy relation. Oh, well, who am I to, and so I'm going to back off. And we lose sight that truth is compassion. We lose sight, and what I see in so many of these responses is them, in the name of tolerance and compassion, feeling like they're supposed to step back. We feel like we're supposed to step back and not declare truth because who am I? And several of the things that were said in there is, well, as long as you're not harming anyone, as long as you're not a detriment to society, well, first of all, who's deciding that? Okay, so one person thinks it's not harming anybody, another person, so we get into that. But then why are we excluding the very person who's saying it? Is there anything harming that would harm that guy to walk around believing and saying he's 7 years old? There's all kinds of hurt that would be done to him and in him and through him to walk around with that kind of, and yet, oh, well, I mean, if you want to believe you're 7 years old, go ahead. If you want to believe, I mean, I'm not going to tell you you're not 6'5". So it's not just intellectual stuff. We are terrified in the name of tolerance and compassion. We are terrified to even address actual things. That person, according to the measurement that all of society uses, that person, that guy is not 6'5" tall. And yet, you guys, we can so easily get locked up in going, well, I can't declare the truth because who am I? Well, you can be a bearer of truth. And truth doesn't have to look like hatred. Truth does not have to look like shame. Truth does not have to look like rejection. We are told all over in the Bible of how to speak truth in love, and we're commanded to speak truth in love. But in the name of tolerance and compassion, we can so easily lose sight of truth. And so as you sit here and however you're processing things, where is your truth coming from? Is it just self-imposed? It's like, oh, well, I think this is a good idea. I think it's fine if you think that you're 7 years old. And if you, yeah, who am I? Who are you? You can be the bearer of truth. But where does your truth come from? Ephesians 4, starting in verse 14. Then we will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever that they sound like the truth. And we talked in the first week of this series about the lies that our culture, sex is no big deal. Sex is just recreational. We are faced with lies all the time that sound reasonable. It's like, your gender can be pliable. It can be fluid. It can kind of be whatever you decide it's going to be. And it's not true. And yet we can be tossed back and forth. If you don't know what the truth is, you can be so easily swayed into going, oh, okay, well, I guess it's okay if you think that you're a 6'5" Chinese woman. And I guess my only option is to step back and just let you believe that. Because who am I? And well, what harm is it in letting you believe what you want? Are you willing to speak the truth as an act of compassion? Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more like Christ, who is the head of the body, the church. And we get an amazing example of this in Jesus, through Jesus' ministry, when he encountered people who, in extreme, what we would call extreme ways. A woman caught in the act of adultery. I'm not sure she was fully naked when they drug her out into the street, but she didn't have much on because she was caught in the act. And when she was brought before Jesus, the religious leaders wanted to smack her down. They were ready to stone her. They wanted it to be clear cut. Let's take all our hatred and all our intolerance out on her. And what was Jesus' response? Hey, you better take a look at yourself. And then to the woman, after writing something in the sand, to the woman, he goes, go. change your life. Change the way you think. Stop living against the design of God, because whatever it is that you're searching for, whoever this is that you're having an affair with, you think is going to make you happy, you think is going to be what you want it to be, it's not going to be. Go and leave that. He was willing to speak the truth, and he spoke it in love. He wasn't screaming at her, he wasn't demeaning her, he wasn't making fun of her. And yet, a lot of times, I think that we avoid speaking the truth because we think that's our only option. The Bible would be like, no, that's just as evil. Speak the truth in love. What is your truth? Where are you getting it? And are you willing to speak it in love? Because the body will not be healthy when we try to base things on our own design. When we start going, oh, well, I feel like this. I want to love this. I want to identify as this. And I'm going to take it out of God's design. And I'm going to self-design my life. I'm going to say what it is that I am, and who I am, and what I should do, and how I should act on it, and how I should live this out. I'm going to take this out of God's design, and I'm going to do it myself. It doesn't make you a terrible person. It doesn't make you unlovable. But you need to hear the truth of what God says about you, and who God says you are, and the promise that God says he has for your life. And you guys, we do this in all kinds of ways. We're in this, sex series, so we're putting it in this context, but we do this all the time when it comes to our talents, when it comes to our friendships, when it comes to the ways that we treat people. We do this all the time where we take it out of God's design and we decide, well, this is who deserves my respect. This is who deserves my friendship. This is how I will handle my anger. This is how I'm going to handle my jealousy. We do it in all kinds of ways. So this isn't just a sexuality thing. But when we take it out of God's design and try and make it our own design, the body will never be healthy. And our lives will never be what we are hoping they'll be. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. With the Lord's authority, I say this: live no longer as the Gentiles do, for they are hopelessly confused. Their minds are full of darkness. They wander from the life God gives because they have closed their minds and hardened their hearts against him. I want to challenge each one of you in whatever area of life. In what way have you said, no, this is the design I'm going to follow, and you've hardened your heart against God? And in relationship, maybe it's because, I want to sleep with my girlfriend, and, God says that's not going to be the best for me, so, I'm going to reject God. I'm going to reject God's design. I want to be able to look at porn because, it makes me feel good and it fulfills something in me. And God says that that's not going to be good. And so I'm going to reject that because I should be able to do whatever I want to do. They have no sense of shame. They live for lustful pleasure and eagerly practice every kind of impurity. But that isn't what you learned about. Hello, dog. Okay. Back to it. Shh. They live for lustful pleasure and eagerly practice every kind of impurity. But that isn't what you learned about Christ. Since you have heard about Jesus and you've learned the truth that comes from him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. The boundaries, the call to purity that God has for you is not put there to bring shame and to make you look at it and be like, oh, what, you did what with your boyfriend? Ugh, you're awful. You're dirty. You are unlovable. God's boundaries and God's call on our life is to make us aware of this is how you can receive life, so that we don't end up in a place of going, well, I guess Taya can say she's 3 years old if she wants to. Well, I mean, if Mick wants to say that she's, 67, fine, I guess. God doesn't want us in that place. So he's going, look, I'm going to put boundaries and I'm going to give you directives for your life so you know how to get life. But our culture says, no, you get to identify however you want, in whatever way. You want to hate somebody? Hate somebody. You want to be jealous? You be jealous. You can make up whatever reason you need to be able to be jealous. You want to do whatever with your boyfriend or whatever with your girlfriend. You want to sleep with whoever you go right ahead because you should be allowed. And it doesn't lead to the life that we're hoping for. I want you to look at this statement again. Truth is compassion. In what ways are you not believing that? In your life, in the relationships that you have, the people that you encounter. In what ways do you back off and go, well, you don't look like a 7-year-old. I know for a fact that the year that you were born, and so I know you were not a 7-year-old, but I'm not willing to call that out. I'm not willing to speak the truth in a compassionate way as compassion. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. Stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body. That's a power. Stop telling lies. As well-intentioned as people may be, to withhold truth and be like, well, if you feel like you're 7 years old, if you are male, but you feel like you should be female or you are female, I guess I'll back off. And in what ways are you unwilling to speak the truth? Because the way it's identified here is you're lying. You're lying. And you're letting others believe lies. You're letting others live out lies. They may believe it to be true. This is not a condemnation of like, oh, they don't really believe that. Oh, they don't really identify as that. That may be absolutely genuine. What does it mean for us to speak truth in love into their lives? For God is spirit. This is John 4:24. For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. So you come to church, you sing the songs, you call yourself a Christian. Oh, but I'm not willing to speak that truth because that might not be received as loving, or that doesn't feel very tolerant of just letting a person be whoever they think there should be, so I'm not going to speak that truth. You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 17:14. Thanks. I've given them your word, and the world hates them because they don't belong to the world, just as I don't belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. They do not belong to this world any more than I do. Make them holy by your truth and teach them your word, which is truth. But the trouble with absolute truth is that it puts limits on what is allowed to be true. Would you agree with that? You with me? Okay. The problem with absolute truth is it does put a limit on what's allowed to be true. If something is absolutely true, anything different than that, in whatever version, can't be true. And so, and this is, again, a case in so many areas of our life. But again, we're in this series, so we're doing this. But we want the truth to be whatever someone wants it to be so that they can do whatever they want to do. This is true in our life, and it's also true in the lives of the people that we encounter every day, that we're supposed to speak truth into their life, right? Justifying sex, having sex with someone that you're not married to. Well, and we decide, oh, well, if you're really in love. And so, okay, that's the thing. Or drunk at a party. Justifying having an affair. You think that all this just stops if you get married? People justify having an affair all the time. Well, you can't deny attraction. Maybe, the person I'm married to isn't actually my soulmate. Some of you have experienced the destruction that kind of lie. But according to culture, well, if you're not feeling like that's your soulmate, then you should. Ugh. What you look at on your phone, on your computer, because it's not hurting anything. It's just pictures. It's just video. No harm. And we logic it out. I mean, it's not causing harm to somebody else, but what's it doing to you? If you're attracted to someone, you should just pursue a physical relationship with them, no matter the gender. So if it's same sex, heterosexual, whatever, if you're attracted to them, you should just. Marriage doesn't have to be between a man and a woman, because who are we to dictate who you fall in love with? Insisting that there's not just two genders, there's thousands, and you can be fluid amongst any of them, and whatever it is that you think you feel or resonate with best or most, which may be genuine. I'm not mocking that at all. That's a genuine feeling and understanding that people have. What is the truth we're going to speak into their lives? What truth are we going to stand for? And God's heart is not, I hate you, I don't want life for you, that's gross. But there are a few things that we should consider as evidence in this area of relationship that we should really see. The first marriage divorce rate is 41%, which is tragic. 41% of first marriages end in divorce. And many of them are because, I don't feel in love, or I found something else, or I should be able to hit my wife, or what. So let's try again. Second marriage divorce rate, 60%. Well, my first marriage didn't work, but now this one, this is gonna be better, and this is gonna be fulfilling. This is the one. 60%. Third marriage, 73%. 73% of third marriage, these are people who have convinced themselves, for whatever reason, convinced themselves that, no, I can dictate what's going to make me happy. I can dictate what love is. National suicide rate, less than 1%, which is tragic, which is too many. Suicide rate among transgender people, over 40%. Again, tragic. And so many, and they've done studies and interviews with people who believe that, changing my gender, that's gonna solve it. This is my big problem. This is the thing holding me back. And this number is not all because, society's rejected them. They're not allowed. This, over 40%. Tragic. As they believe that, if I change this about me, this will identify who I really am. And the reality is that it doesn't. Are we willing to speak the truth of who God is? And God would go, I want you to come have a relationship with me and stop trying to identify for yourself what's going to bring you life. I'm going to bring you life. I am the answer to your struggle. I am the answer to your identity. I am the answer to the hurt and the grief that you're feeling. Will you come to me? And God is not going to smack you down. He's not going to call you stupid. He's not going to say you're gross. He's going to say, I'm so glad you came to me, child, my daughter, my son. Are you willing to go to him? Because this is the call for our lives. Imitate God in everything that you do, because you're his kids. Imitate God in everything you, instead of imitating culture, instead of imitating all your friends who are sleeping with their girlfriend and hey, nothing seems to be wrong with them. Instead of calling love anything that you want it to mean, here we are called imitate God in everything that you do. Don't let there be any sexual immorality, impurity, greed. Such sins have no place among God's people. Obscene stories, foolish talks, coarse jokes, these are not for you. Instead, let there be thankfulness to God. But in all these ways, we can justify, oh, dirty jokes, well, it makes people laugh. And when people laugh, I feel loved. Doesn't God want me to feel love? And we can start justifying anything that we want. And when we see people around us doing it, oh, well, who am I to tell them, hey, you shouldn't do that? That's not going to be good for you. Who am I to speak up and speak truth? So let me tell you this, as we head from here and as you go to school tomorrow and back into your relationships, leading people to Jesus should be our first priority. Leading someone into a relationship with Jesus is more important than you trying to convince them not to act on their homosexual impulses. Leading someone into a relationship with Jesus is more important than you trying to convince someone that they don't need a sex change. Leading them to Jesus is what's going to bring them life. That needs to be our first priority. Carefully determine what pleases the Lord. Take no part in the worthless deeds and evil and darkness. Instead, expose them. Is your priority to please the Lord? We're going to end with this. That justifying behavior opposite of what he calls you to will never please him. Deciding that you identify as something else, or that you should be able to act on whatever impulse, whether it's sleeping with a boyfriend or girl, sex outside of marriage, gender identity, sexual orientation, whatever it is, when you start to decide, hey, I'm going to take control of this, I'm going to decide who I am and what's best for me, that isn't pleasing to God. Not because he hates you and you're a bad person, but because you're taking the design from him and going, no, I'm going to redesign this and I'm going to be who I want to be. 1 Peter 4:8, most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. You guys, the important thing in all of this is to love people. Love them, which means speaking truth. It means speaking truth in love. And when we love people, when we really love people, when we love them in a way that would go, Brian, don't ride toward that curb. You're going to flip over the handlebars of your bike and it's going to hurt and that's not going to be good for you. That we trust that God's going to be at work and God's going to speak that truth and he's going to bring that healing. But when we don't, and we step back and we go, who am I? When you have the truth, when you have the hope and you have the joy that people need through Jesus, and you step back and you let them ride into that curb, when you let that friend who already weighs 78 pounds continue to declare over their life, I'm fat, I'm not eating anymore, I've stopped eating, I'm not going to eat anymore, and you step back, well, who am I to tell them that they're not fat? I mean, if they identify as fat, if they think they're fat, then who am I? Suddenly it doesn't seem very compassionate. And I think all of us would go, no, there you step in. But we justify all kinds of reasons not to step in and declare truth. And God says we are to speak truth and speak it in love, because love covers a multitude of things that we do against God. And I realize that this topic is huge in our culture right now. And I realize that there are tons of really adamant people who are like, you can't say this and you should say this. And I also realize that there may be people in here and you're struggling, whether it's with gender issues or sexuality issues or with a relationship that you're in. And we want you to know that we are so glad that you are here. You belong here. You are loved here. You are going to hear truth here, and it's going to be truth in love. And we want to walk with you in this, and I don't want it to just to be a thing of like, there, I said it, I was the one on the stage, end of discussion. We want to have discussions with you. We want to walk with you. We want to encourage you. Please stick around. Please keep coming, because God has truth for your heart. Right now, we're going to go down into 56 degrees, all of us. We're going to go right out this door, down the stairs, turn right. We're going to go into that room, and we're going to have an opportunity. We've been talking for the last 4 weeks about all kinds of things, boundaries in relationships, and relationship, and the power of sex, and all of these things. And we want to give an opportunity. If there are questions that you have, we're going to have all the leaders up front, and we want to give you some input and respond to some questions that you've had. And so we're all going to head down there. Go ahead and go right now. And we are going to let the junior hires in before they lose their minds.